Schein, saying in part, Bill Schein has done an outstanding job working for me in the administration. We will miss him in the White House, but look forward to working together on the 2020 presidential campaign, where he will be totally involved. But CNN has learned that behind the scenes, the president had begun to sour on Schein, growing increasingly frustrated with the lack of improvement in press coverage and questioning Schein's judgment on a number of issues in recent months. Let's get right to it now. CNN political analyst and Politico White House reporter Eliana Johnson with us. Okay, so we're learning that he was disappointed in Schein. Is this something that surprised you?
You know, it's not surprising, as the president tends to bring people in and sour on them quickly, but Schein is an interesting case because his background was as a Fox News executive, and given the president's proclivity for Fox News, I think he had high expectations for Schein, who is a longtime best friend of Sean Hannity, one of the president's close friends. I think he expected to bring Schein in and see the news coverage generally look a lot more like Fox News, and was disappointed that that wasn't the case. And I think the two really never totally clicked or hit it off. But that's not particular to Schein. He is the fifth person to hold this title of White House Communications Director. And you begin to see a pattern where I think it's really that nobody can really perform this job successfully in the White House for a president who does his own communications.
There was also a story here in the last few days in The New Yorker by Jane Mayer about Fox News. Bill Schein featured prominently in it. This was about how Fox News essentially has been operating as propaganda or state-run TV for the Trump administration. Did that have anything to do with this, do you think? The timing's certainly close.
The timing's very close. I don't think we know yet whether the story was directly related to Schein's departure, but the relationship began to sour a long time before the publication of this story, with the president expressing disappointment that he hadn't seen greater improvement in the news coverage with Schein inside the White House. And I think Schein feeling he didn't have all that much to do. He was really focusing on improving sort of the look of the set, you know, things like he was doing at Fox. The president not seeing a great improvement in the headlines that he got and expressing frustration to allies about that.
So as you bring up the point that there have been 5 comms directors, and I mean, it's a difficult job, and clearly no one's really cutting it with what the president wants. Maybe what he wants is impossible. Is there a replacement in his mind?
I don't think the White House has begun to look for a replacement yet. And truly, I think the major problem here is the president doesn't give a communications director latitude to do the job. He doesn't take the advice of communications director who tell him, you know, maybe you shouldn't send so many tweets. And he often stomps on the communications of his own aides who are trying to do it for him. You've seen the White House press briefings stop altogether because the president's aides can go out and speak for him, but the president often contradicts them. And so I think the aides in the president's press shop have found that it is a fruitless endeavor to go out and amplify one of the president's message when he often contradicts it at a moment's notice. And he's really the only person who can speak for the White House right now.
And for now, I guess Donald Trump is the comms director, right? Eliana, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And also breaking, President Trump is defending his former campaign chairman Paul Manafort and blasting his former personal attorney and fixer Michael Cohen. The president spoke to reporters before leaving the White House to visit areas of Alabama hit by deadly tornadoes. And he said this about the sentencing of his former campaign chairman.
I feel very badly for Paul Manafort. I think it's been a very, very tough time for him. The judge, I mean, for whatever reason, I was very honored by it, also made the statement that this had nothing to do with collusion with Russia. So, you know, keep it going. Let's go. Keep the hoax going. Just a hoax.
That's not actually what the judge said. Now, as for his ex-attorney, Michael Cohen, the president tweeted, "Bad lawyer and fraudster Michael Cohen said under sworn testimony that he never asked for a pardon. His lawyers totally contradicted him. He lied. Additionally, he directly asked me for a pardon. I said no. He lied again. He also badly wanted to work at the White House. He lied." White House reporter Jeremy Diamond is traveling with the president in Alabama. We can see tornado damage behind you. That is why the president is there. But this has followed him to Alabama. Jeremy, tell us about the president and what he's saying here, because he's clearly mischaracterizing what the Manafort judge said about Russia collusion.
He is, and what the president said there about, in the way that he characterized the judge's comments is absolutely false. What the judge said as he was sentencing Paul Manafort to nearly 4 years in prison was that Paul Manafort was not before the court for anything having to do with collusion with the Russian government, meaning that the case that was before this judge in that moment, which was bank fraud, tax fraud, those issues had nothing to do with collusion, Russian collusion involving the 2016 presidential election. This judge was not making a definitive ruling on the question of whether or not the president's campaign colluded in any way with the Russian government to interfere in the 2016 campaign. We know that this is something that the president has done repeatedly, of course. Anytime anybody says something that, they haven't yet seen any evidence as it relates to collusion with Russia or, so far nothing has come up in that way, nothing definitive, the president seizes on that as if it is a definitive statement, effectively ruling out the issue of Russian collusion when that is not exactly the case. But right now, the president is turning to different matters here in Alabama, where he is touring some of the storm damage wrought by one of these EF4 category tornadoes that just swept through this area here in Lee County, Alabama. You can see some of the damage behind me here. It is absolutely devastating. 23 people so far confirmed dead, and the president coming here to share his thoughts and prayers with the people affected.
All right, Jeremy, and we will follow that visit as well. Jeremy Diamond in Lee County, Alabama. And I want to bring in former federal prosecutor and CNN legal analyst Laura Coates now to talk with us. So, Laura, the president is saying, basically in his tweet, that Michael Cohen directly asked for a pardon. And there's a little more of what he said before leaving for Alabama. Let's listen.
Michael Cohen lied about the pardon. That was a stone-cold lie. And he's lied about a lot of things, but when he lied about the pardon, that was really a lie. And he knew all about pardons. His lawyers said that they went to my lawyers and asked for pardons. And I could go a step above that, but I won't go do it now.
So that's not... What's the fallout from this, I think, especially because you've heard some Republicans say, if he lied about one thing, they're not going to think kindly about everything that Michael Cohen said.
Well, first of all, plainly, Michael Cohen's credibility remains an issue. Remember, he'd already lied to Congress. That's one of the reasons why he has had this issue. Also, the nature of the crimes that he has been convicted of and pled guilty to are lie-based offenses as well. So that's an issue. However, the selective amnesia or selective credibility is what's the bigger issue here. Notice the timing of it. Immediately after he testified last week, the president claimed that there were a whole host of lies that were told. Conveniently, the ones that made him look good about his wife and other matters and about his treatment of women in some capacities, he wanted people to believe that aspect of it. But why come out now and say that you were directly asked if that was a very blatant and very explicit lie that he told at the time? Also, in terms of Michael Cohen, credibility is an issue. And Brianna, when you rely on semantics, you have an even bigger problem. The idea of, well, no, I didn't ask specifically. I had my lawyers do something to ask your lawyers. Your people called my people. That is a little bit of a murkier water. But Cohen has come out to that's actually a lie. That did not happen. He did not ask for it directly. But either way, it's very well known. The president has the pardoning power. If there was a conversation between Cohen's attorneys about exploring the possibility of it, it doesn't transform it into an outright lie by Cohen to say that I didn't do it. But again, I admit fully that this is a credibility issue that keeps haunting Michael Cohen. But the selectivity of credibility is equally a problem.
So at this point, this is a he said, right? Mm-hmm. And if you were Cohen's attorney, would you be advising him to go on Twitter and say this? Just another set of lies by President Trump. Mr. President, let me remind you that today is International Women's Day. You may want to use today to apologize for your own lies and dirty deeds to women like Karen McDougal and Stephanie Clifford.
So I would not have invoked International Women's Day. That was probably a bad look.
You wouldn't have said, hey, you should do this, client.
I wouldn't have done any of it.
Surprised,
and because I was thinking with common sense, Brianna, on that point, and I think you do have
He's
the
a lawyer,
right to
though,
remain
Laura.
silent.
Come on.
Well, no longer in New York. He's been disbarred based on his
That's
conduct.
right. He has the training, let's say.
That's true. But I will say the notion of the tit for tat that goes on, when you have a credibility contest between two people who have their own unique sets of credibility issues, you do have the balancing favor favor go against who has lied the least and who has had some corroboration to their statements. You can go back to Michael Cohen. Part of the reason that his credibility is buttressed in comparisons to Donald Trump is because the SDNY and the Mueller probe has assigned some level of gravitas to his statements and credibility by virtue of cooperating agreements or cooperation allowance, and also by virtue that they've allowed him to plead guilty to different cases. So you do have some receipts. And let's not forget, there was a check that was held up to show that there had been some payment about the very issue that involving Stephanie Clifford and Karen McDougal. So it's a bit of a people in glass houses should not throw stones, and she facilitated a transactional payment to these women. But in all ultimate respect, all of these men, stop talking.
All these men stop talking. Laura Coates, thank you so much. So the president is also making a stunning remark today about the Democratic Party after the House passed a broad resolution calling out bigotry of all kinds without directly condemning freshman Congresswoman Ilhan Omar for recent anti-Semitic remarks. Take a listen.
I thought that vote was a disgrace, and so does everybody else if you get an honest answer. If you get an honest answer from politicians, they thought it was a disgrace. The Democrats have become an anti-Israel party. They've become an anti-Jewish party.
So the House voted 407 to 23 to pass the resolution. Those 23 no votes were from Republicans, including Congressman Chip Roy of Texas, who is with us now. And Congressman, thank you for being with us, and tell us about this, because you did not think that this went far enough.
Hi, Brianna. First, thanks for having me on this afternoon. Good to be on again. And I want to offer my thoughts and prayers for the people in Lee County, Alabama. My deputy chief of staff went to Auburn, grew up in Auburn. She's there home now with family. And so just know that our hearts are with the people down there that are suffering with the tornado damage. With respect to the vote yesterday, I was proud to vote no. We've had votes before on this very topic. You know why? Because this is a troubling trend with my colleague, Representative Omar, where she continues to make these statements. And so we've already had a vote calling out anti-Semitism. I was happy to vote for that. But this was a show vote. This was a sham vote that was designed specifically to kind of be a cover for Representative Omar rather than calling her out specifically. And I've been delighted with the support I've gotten with friends of mine in the Jewish community. My colleague Lee Zeldin, who spoke passionately on the floor of the House of Representatives yesterday. I would encourage anybody to look at his comments about why he thought this wasn't the right response. And I think the final point I would make is, if you're going to engage in this kind of activity where we're focusing on identity politics, which I wish we weren't, then let's put it aside and don't do anything. Don't have a show vote. Let's get busy doing the work of the American people. Let's balance the budget. Let's secure the border. Let's get back to healthcare freedom. But instead, we had a show vote, wasted more time, and we did nothing to actually deal with the issues that my colleague unfortunately continues to repeat in her anti-Semitic statements.
So by that logic, this desire that you have to clearly call out the person who said something, does that mean that whenever any member, a Republican House member, makes a racist or anti-Semitic remark, that you want to call them out by name in a resolution?
What it really means is, number one, I would rather not even be focusing on identity politics, like I said in the first place. But if you're going to have a resolution, now the second, third, fourth time that we've had a member of the Congress who is making comments about our Jewish friends and our neighbors in Israel and AIPAC and making these pretty horrific comments, that we ought to address them directly or not have a show vote. If you don't want to actually address the comments, then let's get busy doing the work. Let's have a debate about whether she should be on the Foreign Relations Committee. Let's talk about balancing the budget. Let's talk about the budget that the president's going to be sending us on Monday, instead of having a show vote, which is really what that was, a complete show vote.
The president, I think you may have just heard him. He spoke as he left for Alabama there on the South Lawn, and he called the Democratic Party anti-Jewish. Do you agree with that?
I would not cast aspersions on a wide net to my colleagues in the House. Like I said, I'd like to be focusing on the business of the American people. It's why I was sent to Washington, D.C., was to do the things I've already mentioned, balance the budget, healthcare freedom, secure the border. I want to focus on the budget the president's sending up. I do think the president is right to call out this vote. I think, comments like it's all about the Benjamins. I mean, these are the kinds of things she continues to do. This isn't the first time. Everybody in the media knows that. There's a history of it going back before she was elected. We're now seeing it now that she's on the floor of the House of Representatives. I would rather she not be doing that. I would rather we get back to focusing on our work. But if the Democrat Congress is going to pull a resolution onto the floor of the House and force us to vote on it, then it ought to be meaningful instead of another show vote that the American people are tired of wasting the time that we have here to represent them.
So, you said he's right to call this out. And look, I am certainly not defending what Congresswoman Ilhan Omar has said. But the head of your party, the president, he has not only trafficked in anti-Semitic tropes, which is the complaint about Congresswoman Omar. He even said that during Charlottesville that there were good people on both sides of the debate. On one side of the debate, you had white supremacists who were anti-Semitic.
Well, of course, there is no argument that what was happening in Charlottesville is defensible. I'm a graduate of the University of Virginia. I took great sorrow in what we saw unfold and both the loss of life. But then let's fast forward to a year later where there was more hate-filled bigots that were taking the streets in Charlottesville. There's no room for it. We should call it out and move on. I think the president should have been more forceful in August of 2017 on that point. I think a lot of people called him out, and I think that he ended up getting back to a place where he was a little more forceful about it. But you know what? Look, we weren't debating that yesterday. What we were debating was very specifically the remarks made by my colleague that has been repeated, not just once, not twice, not a simple misstatement. It's all about the Benjamins. We're talking about, Israel, about how our foreign policy is all beholden to Israel and all of these things she continues to say. And we were addressing that, yet the Democrat Party refused to actually address it. They just did another resolution saying, well, we're all against any, Semitic remarks. Well, no kidding. Of course we are. We should be. But let's get busy doing the work of the people instead of playing these identity politics games.
All right, Congressman Chip Roy, thank you so much for being with us.
Brianna, have a great weekend. Great to see you.
You too. So the president is reacting to a tough jobs report after we learn America's budget and trade deficits are exploding. Plus, he's one of the loudest critics of the president and happens to be married to Kellyanne Conway. Why George Conway says the U.S. is nearing a banana republic. And two former rivals from the Clinton impeachment in the same room together for the first time. See what happened when Ken Starr and Joe Lockhart went head to head.
Hold on a second.
Hold on, Joe.
President Trump,
he didn't shut down the investigation. That's one of the key things.
He then tried to remove and then fired his attorney general. What else do you need?
Really illuminating.
So let's listen to what Monica Lewinsky, or what was said about Monica Lewinsky.
Yeah.
Many people feel that the judge was too lenient, one of whom is Monica Lewinsky, who's pointing out the sentence that he got. She says, yep, I had been threatened with 27 years for filing a false affidavit and other actions, trying desperately to keep an affair private. Do you see her point?
Of course I see the point. No one should, in fact, have to face these horrible sentences.
But who was threatening her with 27 years for filing a false affidavit?
Oh, there may have been a conversation. I did not, but we'll see. That's the first I've heard of that, to be honest.
Joe, when you look at all this, well, okay, you're skeptical.
I'm skeptical of that only because it's been reported widely. It's in Monica Lewinsky's book. It's in a number of interviews. Her lawyer did dozens of interviews where they talked about holding her in a hotel room and telling her that if she didn't tell the truth, she could spend 27 years in jail. So I'm skeptical.
Well, first of all, she was not held in a hotel room. She had the opportunity. So if we want to relitigate that, I'm happy to do that.
Well, today,
let me finish it, because he just made a very interesting comment. They held her in a hotel room. Absolutely false. That was exactly what she maintained and what her lawyer at the time maintained. And guess what? A district judge, Norma Holloway Johnson, heard what they had to say and said she was not. She was not in custody. She was, in fact, free to leave.
Yeah. She was 21 years old. She had several older prosecutors sitting in a room threatening her with spending a considerable part of her life in jail. So she may not have been technically in custody, but in this case, I believe her. She felt like she had no choice. She felt like, and it was only when she called her mother, and her mother came down, and her mother talked to a lawyer, that she recognized the idea that she didn't need to be there and she should leave.
It was her impression that she was being...
It was certainly her impression.
With all due respect, utterly revisionist history. She played our prosecutors very effectively. She knew exactly what she was doing.
Wow, what do you make of all that, Essie?
Well, it's almost as if those memories for those two are right here at the surface,
I know.
right?
Yes.
I mean, I lived Clinton, you lived Clinton, but they have every memory sort of right here. And that's because it was such a tumultuous, tense time. And I think it's safe to say that what both the special counsel did to Monica and what Bill Clinton and his surrogates did to Monica was awful. And I only hope that in looking back at that affair, at that scandal, we remember the center of it, the victim, Monica Lewinsky, and revisiting that in so many ways in the era of Me Too, in the era of Trump, is important for all of us. And it was just such a special gift to have these two do it so willingly, and to have our John Berman and Allison Camerata sort of mitigate this conversation so well. I feel like it was a masterclass. I wish everyone could see it.
Yeah, it was phenomenal. All right, S.E. Cupp, thank you so much. And we can catch S.E. Cupp on her show, S.E. Cupp Unfiltered, tomorrow and every Saturday at 6 p.m. Eastern. And new today, President Trump saying he has a feeling his relationship with Kim Jong-un is a good one despite the failed summit in Vietnam. We'll be getting former Director of National Intelligence James Clapper to weigh in on that. And new today, job creation screeches to a near halt in the month of February, but was it all bad news? We're going to break down the numbers. President Trump says he is optimistic about his relationship with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un despite troubling signs from the regime. Satellite images appear to show the country is rebuilding a facility used to test long-range missile engines. And the president says it's too early, though, to tell whether North Korea is restarting its missile testing program. But he's optimistic that that is not the case.
I have a feeling that our relationship with North Korea, Kim Jong-un and myself, Chairman Kim, I think it's a very good one. I think it remains good. I would be surprised in a negative way if he did anything that was not per our understanding, but we'll see what happens.
Former Director of National Intelligence James Clapper is here with us now. He's a CNN national security analyst. When you hear the president saying that, Director, do you have any concerns that he's not being realistic about what's happening?
Well, I think this is, Brianna, more a result of Kim Jong-un's charm offensive. And Kim Jong-un has achieved a huge thing here for him, for the North Koreans, because now he is seen as co-equal with President Trump, which is something North Koreans have long desired. And accordingly, I think he's going to be very solicitous of President Trump and their personal relationship. But in the meantime, he's also achieving an objective of his, which is he wants to be seen as a legitimate member of the nuclear club. In other words, another nuclear nation in the world. And de facto, he already is. So I think it's very unlikely, and we're seeing signs of that they're really going to denuclearize. Or if they ever do, it is not going to be because of what Washington demands. It's going to be because of the relationship with the South.
With the South, not with the U.S. So what we can see from these images what appears to be the sort of the re-upping of long-range missile capabilities. So even as there is this maybe chummy relationship, even in the absence of a deal, that is what is going on behind the scenes. The president has been lauding the fact that there are not missile launches. But what if there is one? What if there is a test as these capabilities are restored?
Well, what the North Koreans have done in the past is try to distinguish between a rocket or missile used for peaceful purposes, a satellite, as opposed to an offensive missile. Now, the technology, obviously, engine technology is the same. So the North Koreans could say that we're doing another peaceful missile launch, and he could even go so far as to pre-alert everybody, to include the United States, that they're going to launch such a missile, if that's their objective, but still gain the insight from, which could be used for, obviously, intercontinental ballistic missiles. So I think, actually, from Kim Jong-un's standpoint, he's pursuing a very shrewd strategy.
What's the president's move if that does happen, even if it's under this idea of, oh, it's a peaceful missile launch? What should the president
Well, I don't
do?
know that we can't. I don't know what we can do about it. Protest and express our concerns, but in the meantime, North Korea is marching along.
So President Trump turning now to some comments that he made about Russia and there not being collusion. He's seizing on something that a judge actually did not say. He's misrepresenting what the judge in Paul Manafort's sentencing, which was just under about 4 years, what he said. The judge had made the point of saying that this case was not about collusion, because it's about tax fraud, right? But Trump said falsely, and he sort of seemed to say that this was something that he could sort of wear as a feather in his cap, that the judge said there was no collusion with Russia. The judge did not say that. What's the effect of the president misrepresenting comments like this?
They could put out the new phone book in Washington, D.C., and the president would seize on it and say, see, no collusion, because the phone book didn't say anything about collusion. I mean, it's not surprising. It's very consistent that he's going to seize on anything, whether it's relevant or not, to say there's no collusion.
What's the effect of it, do you think?
Well, to me, it's just being consistent with every other opportunity he gets to say, whether it's relevant or applicable or not, to say there's no Russian collusion, even though that wasn't what the judge was addressing.
Repeating it over and over, do you think it sticks? Do you think it convinces people?
Well, I think it does. I think repeating a lot of things has had impact. The incessant attacks, for example, on the FBI, which is terrible, but I think it's had some effect. Witness the drop-off in applications to be special agents, which is unprecedented in modern times. So yes, repetition is an effective way to educate.
The drop-off in applications to be special agents, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so this week, Axios looked at the Trump-Russia scandal, and they said that, and this was based on talking to historians, they said this was the biggest political scandal in American history. And talking to historians, one of the things that was highlighted was a foreign power being a central player in this scandal is something that, in many of their estimations, makes it worse than Watergate. Do you agree with that?
Well, I have for some time felt that way. And I'm old enough to have lived through Watergate as an adult. And the involvement of a foreign nation, notably our arch adversary, Russia, in affecting the outcome of a political process, is unprecedented in this country. And I think certainly the Axios has to rank right up there with the highest candidates for the biggest scandal ever.
All right. Thank you so much, Director. Really appreciate you being on set with us, as always.
Thanks for having me.
Former Director of National Intelligence James Clapper with us. And coming up, he's one half of a Washington power couple with very different views. And today, Kellyanne Conway's husband, George Conway, is warning Trump's actions may lead to a banana republic.
At Fidelity,
Trump puts that in jeopardy. Take a listen to what he said earlier today.
And the president has suggested that members of his own Justice Department should be locked up for investigating the president. Now, if people were to get indicted or not indicted on the basis of whether the president likes them, we wouldn't have a republic, we'd have a banana republic.
Now, that's just a little sampling of what Conway said today. We know that he has been a fierce critic of the president on Twitter, and the president